Welcome to Bed Crime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. To my loyal bed crimers, so nice to have you here. To anyone new to the channel, a special warm welcome. Before I get started, let me just ask that if after listening to this episode you find you enjoyed it or learned something, please hit that like button. It's a free way you can help me. Now let's dig in. It's been 11 days since University of Idaho students Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernado, and Ethan Chapin were discovered deceased in their beds. The savage who subjected the four friends to a brutal and inhumane attack has yet to be found. FBI special agents are busy analyzing the wealth of evidence left at the crime scene. It's been said that the perpetrator was disorganized and sloppy and left a ton of evidence in the house. As law enforcement works the investigation, the victims' families are trying to be patient. According to Kaylee's mother, they haven't received much more information about the attack from the police than we, the public, have. Her husband is in contact with the investigators every day, and so far, every day, they only tell him that they have nothing. You can imagine how hopeless this makes the family feel. Kaylee's sister, Olivia, has been working hard to establish a more precise timeline than what law enforcement has put out. It sounds like the police are somewhat estimating and rounding up the times because Olivia has discovered more exacting hours for the events of late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. Here is what Olivia shared about the timeline in a recent interview. First, Kaylee and Madison were picked up by an Uber driver at exactly 10:15 p.m. The two best friends were then driven to the Corner Club bar in downtown Moscow. It takes about 5 minutes by car to get there, so they arrived at the bar at about 10:20 p.m. At 1:45 a.m., Kaylee called for another Uber to drive them home. That Uber driver said he arrived at the Corner Club bar at 1:49 p.m. The girls got in the car and were driven over to the grub truck, where they picked up some pasta. It takes about 10 minutes for that order to be prepared. Kaylee and Madison were then driven back home, where they arrived at around 1:56 a.m. So they did not arrive home at 1:45 a.m., as the police have been saying. It was closer to 2 a.m. Now here's an odd detail. According to Kaylee's sister, Olivia, she's called the two unharmed roommates to try and get any and all information they might have, and they haven't called her back. Wouldn't you think that those fortunate survivors would be doing all they could to supply the victims' families with as much information as they can? Why aren't they in contact with the victims' families? Is it survivor's guilt? Is it something else? Have they been in contact with lawyers who are saying don't talk to them? Are they simply too shocked to talk to Olivia? I'm not insinuating that the two roommates know anything about the crime, but to me, it is a small red flag that they're not returning Olivia's calls, or at least that they hadn't returned her calls at the time of that interview. As for the 10 calls made to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, the family says those were made between 2:30 and 2:52 a.m. 2:52 a.m. marks the last time Kaylee tried to reach out to that young man, or anyone else for that matter. Because Kaylee was on her mother's phone plan, the family was able to access her phone record. Kaylee's mom and sister are adamant that the ex-boyfriend was asleep when Kaylee was calling him. The family remains steadfast in their belief that this guy, the ex-boyfriend, had nothing to do with the crime. Kaylee's mom added that she's sure that Kaylee was not calling her ex-boyfriend to ask him for help regarding some danger at her house. The mother made it clear that if Kaylee and Madison felt they were in danger, they would have dialed 911, not Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. And that does make a lot of sense. Law enforcement seems to believe that the blitz-style attack inside the home occurred sometime after 3 a.m. So did Kaylee stop calling her ex-boyfriend at 2:52 a.m. because she decided to go to bed? Or did the attack occur right around 3 a.m. hour? I'm tending toward the idea that she and Madison went to bed because the coroner said that all 4 students were found in bed. But it may be that they had just enough time to fall asleep before the perpetrator showed up. Kaylee's family wasn't able to shed light on what Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin did after they left the frat party that they attended from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Law enforcement is saying that the couple arrived back at the home around 1:45 a.m. So everyone is wondering where they were between 9 p.m. and 1:45 a.m. Maybe they were at another bar in town. It should be fairly easy for the police to find that out, provided other bar goers and bartenders saw them and are willing to tell the police about that. Now, prior to that Saturday, on Friday, November 11th, Kaylee Gonsalves had been at her mom and dad's house. In fact, on Friday morning, Kaylee had been car shopping and she bought a Range Rover using all her own funds. She had thought about staying home that weekend, but was very excited to show her best friend, Madison, her new ride. So excited that she drove back to Moscow. She hadn't told Maddie which vehicle she decided upon ultimately, and she wanted to drive up to the house on King Road and surprise her best friend with her new car. Kaylee also wanted to go to a party at her sorority house Friday night, which she did end up attending according to her mom. So Kaylee's original plans had been to stay at her parents' home, and she'd only changed the plans at the last minute. This may mean that Kaylee wasn't the perpetrator's primary target. If there was one target, maybe then it was Madison or Xana. That doesn't seem to be where all the tips are leading. The tips are saying the target was Kaylee. I don't think it would be Ethan because he didn't live at the house and he just happened to be staying over that night. I suspect the perpetrator wasn't expecting to see Ethan Chapin at that house that night. The other tragic point is that Kaylee might not have died that weekend if she'd stayed at her parents' home instead of driving back to the university. Kaylee's family is being very pragmatic about it, expressing that they felt some comfort knowing that at least Kaylee and Madison were together in the end. This reminded me so much of Libby German and Abby Williams' friendship and how they faced their attacker together. Kaylee called her mother on Saturday afternoon around 2 p.m. and then on Sunday morning, Kaylee's mother was texting her but getting no response. It turns out the police were at the house when those texts were arriving on Kaylee's phone. At this point, Kaylee's family is begging for the perpetrator to turn himself in, and Kaylee's mother believes very strongly that Kaylee and Madison knew the perpetrator. She doesn't have any evidence to support this. It's just a mother's intuition, a feeling in her gut. But she also pointed out that it was a violent, targeted attack, which points to it being personal, and this would support the girls knowing whoever did this. The family also has no idea why someone would have done this to Kaylee and her 3 friends. Kaylee's aunt mentioned the word jealousy, but said there would have been no reason for it. Kaylee's mother was very concerned about having a celebration of life for Kaylee and Madison or a candlelight vigil because she's concerned that the perpetrator might be in the crowd. This poor family is unable to grieve, unable to lay their beloved Kaylee to rest until the person responsible is caught. The mother said they just want it to end, and Kaylee's aunt described it as a living nightmare. Kaylee's mother made it clear that if this crime had happened to other students at the university, she would have insisted that Kaylee and Madison come home right away, and she said they would not have gone back to the university until the person responsible was caught. Their feelings are that no one is safe in Moscow until the perpetrator is caught. By the way, the family feels that whoever did this, while he or she or they were sloppy, the crime was still premeditated. They said that whoever it was someone who went into the home uninvited. That shows premeditation. The family also wants everyone to stop using the words "a crime of passion" because they feel that that would indicate that it happened out of the blue, randomly, say, over an argument. But whoever did this went into that home uninvited with that sharp-edged object in hand, ready to destroy the sleeping students. I have to say that seeing Kaylee's mom, sister, and aunt really puts another layer of humanity on this situation. Kaylee was so loved and cherished, as was Madison, who the family views as another daughter. Madison's parents have yet to speak. Madison was their only child, so you can only imagine their utter devastation. Kaylee's mom also shared that her daughter was planning to backpack through Europe in January before starting a new job. Clearly, Kaylee was a go-getter, someone with big plans, that if Kaylee really did have a stalker, per the many tips that have apparently been called in to the Moscow Police Department, and if that person came to harm her, perhaps the other victims got in the way. Let me explain. My feeling is that Kaylee and Madison likely had their bedrooms on the 3rd floor. I don't know that, I'm speculating, but I'm thinking that if the perpetrator had to walk up past the 2nd floor, and if he or she or they found Xana and Ethan in a bedroom on the 2nd floor and maybe not fully asleep, maybe just lounging in bed, those two, Xana and Ethan, might have seen or heard the perpetrator. If so, the perpetrator had to do them in so that they could not identify him. That could explain Xana having defensive wounds. Maybe she was more awake than the other victims who may not have had defensive wounds. And Ethan, by virtue of being with Xana, also had to go. The perpetrator would then have to go up to the 3rd floor, where perhaps the primary target of his rage was sleeping. What else could explain this person going up to the 3rd floor? He didn't touch the roommates on the ground floor, of course, but we heard they had their doors locked, so that might have been enough to spare them. But if the object of this perpetrator was on the 3rd floor, he would have had to walk by the 2nd floor, which may have made him feel that he had to get rid of the people on that floor. You'd think if this person is a stalker type, and if he or she or they really had targeted Kaylee or Maddie or both, he'd just harm them and then get out of the house. To me, this is hinting that Kaylee and Maddie had bedrooms on that 3rd floor. By the way, I heard another criminal profiler today say that one of the ways the investigators may be able to figure out who, if there was a primary target, who that was, is by looking at the injuries on each victim. The primary target is likely to have more savage, more brutal wounds than the other victims. Such a sad case. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories.